Before we start, can you all please mute your microphones for the moment in order to improve the sound quality? Whilst I outline the procedure. Can you also please turn off your cameras with the exception of committee members unless you're the person speaking. This is to reduce the bandwidth. Committee members will have their cameras switched on throughout the hearing. Can I check all committee members have their cameras on? Yes. Fine. And could everyone attending today's meeting please put their mobile phones on silent and ensure they're situated in a room or environment which is free from distractions or any unnecessary noise emanating from radios, TVs, etc. Thank you for that. I'll speak slowly and clearly so everyone can follow. It's vitally important for what I hope are obvious reasons that those attending the meeting and making representations are able to hear me and members of my subcommittee and officers. Any distractions brought to my attention could result in the meeting being suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these types of meetings. I also confirm this is a public meeting and is therefore being live streamed on the City Council's website in order that the general public can view it. This meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcasts by the Council's meeting YouTube site, details of which you can find in the agenda. And that members of the press public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest arising from any business to be discussed in this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. We've received no apologies for this morning's meeting. Can I welcome you to this hearing for an application in respect of the George V Common Lane, Sheldon, B26. I'll begin with some introductions. My name is Councillor Diane Donaldson and I'm chairing this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. With me are other members of the subcommittee, Councillor Sadat Mia and Adam Higgs. Also present in the meeting are the following officers. Licensing Officer Bhupendra Nandra.
Sorry, Chair, it's me, it's David Kennedy that's covering this morning's hearing. Okay.
Yeah. Licensing Officer David Kennedy. Morning.
Good morning, Chair.
Thank you. Committee Manager Sophia Mirza.
Morning.
Good morning. And Committee Lawyer Joanne Swampillai.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Could I ask all parties to identify themselves, please? Firstly, the applicant, Nishan Chowdhury.
Hi, Sean Chowdhury, the applicant.
Good morning. Next, those making representations. BCC Enforcement, Christina McCulloch.
Christina McCulloch. Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor Paul Tilsley.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Councillor Colin Green.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And Michael Ward, former councillor.
Chair, I believe the applicant is represented by Jill Sherritt, if they can confirm that they're in attendance as well.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Could I ask if any persons making representations wishes to withdraw their representations at this stage of the hearing?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I will assume that all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules sent out with the notice of today's hearing. Right, I'll take that as a yes. Please note that the given nature of today's proceedings, I may, at my discretion, amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact that this meeting is taking place online, but wish to assure you that any such amendments will not impact on the party's right to a fair hearing. We'll be using the chat function in Microsoft Teams to communicate. One of the icons on your toolbar is a speech bubble. Click on the speech bubble to go into chat. If you do not have access to the chat function for any reason, please use the raise a hand function to indicate you wish to speak. That button is usually fourth from the right on the toolbar. You can also, of course, indicate verbally that you wish to speak at the appropriate time. Can you all confirm that you have access to the chat facility by typing your own name now? Officers will also type their job title. The meeting will not proceed until you all have done so. Sophia, is that everyone?
Chair, I've just checked all parties have signed in. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Please keep this chat column open for the entire duration of the meeting in order that everyone can follow the messages being posted in the chat. If any participant has dialed in on the audio telephone rather than Microsoft Teams, please speak now to confirm that you can hear and be heard. I don't believe we have anyone dialing in this morning. With the exception of subcommittee members, please keep your camera off unless you're the person speaking. If there are any problems with bandwidth, which causes difficulties with the sound, I may, in my discretion, ask everyone to turn their cameras off in order that the meeting can proceed with everyone able to hear and be heard. Does anyone wish to make any preliminary points at this stage? If so, please indicate that you wish to raise a point by typing speak into the chat function or using the raise a hand function now. No, I don't believe we have anyone. Thank you. I'll now briefly outline the procedure which we're following at today's hearing. Firstly, the Licensing Officer, David Kennedy, will present the report. Then the applicant will be asked to present their case. we're asking if this can be kept to approximately 20 minutes. Those making representations will be invited to make their case. Again, we're asking if it could be kept to approximately 20 minutes. Can ask all parties to speak as slowly and as clearly as they possibly can, because the officers are taking notes by hand for the minutes, and the meeting is also being live streamed by the City Council's website. If at any time it's somebody else's turn to speak, please mute your microphone and use the chat function to communicate if necessary. Please note that members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, but will try to do so at the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination by the applicant and those making representations will not be permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. Where questions are raised by members of the subcommittee or those present, they must signify this using the chat facility set out on the right-hand side of the screen you're viewing this meeting on. The meeting manager will alert me if I do not notice messages in the chat. I will determine verbally or in writing on the chat facility the order in which questions are dealt with. So at any point in the meeting, if you wish to speak, please type the word speak into the chat function, and the meeting manager will ensure that we come to you at the appropriate moment. If at any point you cannot hear or having problems with your internet connection, please use the chat facility to alert the meeting manager. The chair will then ask the person speaking to repeat what they've just said. It is therefore important that you use the chat function as soon as you're unable to hear. It may well be that there's a problem caused by people still having their microphones or cameras on, which creates interference. So I will remind everyone to please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras when you're not the person speaking. Could I point out that occasionally it may be necessary for the subcommittee to take legal advice. At my discretion, I may ask all parties to wait in this meeting whilst members and the relevant officers withdraw to take legal advice using a separate meeting within Microsoft Teams. We will then return to this meeting and continue. Please note, if at any time the live stream being broadcast on the City Council's website fails, I will ask you to all mute your microphones and cameras and to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. If at any time the meeting goes into private session, the meeting manager will pause the live stream. Once the private part of the meeting is over, I will ask the meeting manager to confirm that the live stream has resumed before we continue. At the conclusion of the hearing, I will invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. Can I stress that no decision will be taken until the evidence has been heard? At the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from this meeting in order to determine the decision. They will go into a separate Microsoft Teams meeting. In the event that members need to clarify any point, you'll be telephoned by the meeting manager. The members will then make their decision. You'll be notified of the decision of the subcommittee within 5 working days. I hope that's reasonably straightforward. So with that, can I ask the licensing officer, David Kennedy, to present the report, please, as slowly and clearly as you can, please.
Thank you, Chair. Zishan Chowdhury applied on the 12th of May 2022 for the grant of a premises licence for the George V Common Lane, Sheldon, Birmingham B26 3BP. The purpose of the report is to consider representations that have been made in respect of the application, which seeks to permit the sale of alcohol for consumption both on and off the premises to operate from 8 AM until 11 PM Monday to Sunday. The premises to remain open to the public during the same hours Monday to Sunday. A representation has been received from Birmingham City Council's licensing enforcement team as a responsible authority, which is attached at Appendix 1. Representations have been received from other persons, which are attached at Appendices 2 to 4. The application is attached at Appendix 5. Conditions have been agreed with West Midlands Police and the applicant, which are attached at Appendix 6, and site location plans are at Appendix 7. When carrying out its licensing functions, a licensing authority must have regard to Birmingham City Council's statement of licensing policy and the guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182 of the Act. The licensing authority is required to take such steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives. The options available to the committee today are to grant the licence in accordance with the application, to reject the application, to grant the licence subject to conditions modified to such an extent as considered appropriate, exclude from the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, and or to refuse to specify the person in the licence as the premises supervisor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Would the applicant like to make their presentation now, please?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for that. My name's Jill Sherratt from Licensing Matters, and I'm representing Mr. Zishan Chowdhury, who is your applicant today. As you know, it's an application for a public house that is already there. It's been there for many years. We're applying to reinstate the licence there from 8 until 11, Monday to Sunday. Now, you'll be well aware that this should be a simple application, but unfortunately, it's being made against the backdrop of previous problems. We don't dispute anything that's gone on in the past. There's reference to drugs and social behaviour, and essentially the pub being a no-go area for local people. That's all completely accepted. But you're being asked to refuse this application based on historical problems that obviously are unconnected to the applicant and what he can bring to the table. You're being asked to look back. You're being asked to assess the application on the basis of the past. And essentially, in as far as I can see, conduct a second review. There was a review back in 2021 where the licence was revoked, and you're being asked to go back over those kinds of circumstances to justify a refusal of this licence. Now, I'm here to ask you to take a more open-minded, forward-thinking approach as the framework of the licensing process demands. Licensing is never a brick wall to new applications and new applicants coming forward. It doesn't matter what's happened in the past. As you know, every application has to be taken on its own merits, and I'm pretty certain we can demonstrate to you that the merits of this case are very, very strong today. So the way that I'm going to play this, that Mr. Chowdhury is of such calibre that I want him to speak to you today. I wouldn't normally do that. I think it's essential today. You don't want to hear too much from me when he is here. So I'm going to do a bit of background about him. Then I'm going to ask Mr. Chowdhury if he may come in and speak to you directly. And then I will come back in afterwards and just make some more submissions, if that's okay with everyone. So just as in terms of the background about Mr. Chowdhury, it's obviously key. The person who's coming in to run this previously troubled premises is key. And I think it's fair to say, and obviously Councillor Tilsley and the licensing officer will correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think anyone's questioning Mr. Chowdhury's significant capabilities and his calibre as an operator of licensed premises. We've done significant pre-consultation with them, with the police, and I know that the licensing officer has met with him. Councillor Tilsley's spoken to him at length over the phone. And it is fair to say, and I don't think they'll contradict this, you haven't got your average applicant in front of you here today. Once he is at the helm, and it's his very firm belief that once he's operating this premises, there will be no problems as there's been previously. He's been operating licensed premises in the Warwickshire area for over 20 years without problems, without complaints. He employs over 200 people. The pubs that he operates are restaurant, food, pubs, the typical local pubs, family-orientated businesses. They serve home-cooked food. And this premises at the George V, if you grant this licence, will reflect exactly that model. It's the latest addition to his small but perfectly formed group of pubs. He has 6 at the moment. And this business being a success doesn't only matter, it is essential. He cannot risk it not being a success. He's invested in the region of £1.3 million. He's bought this premises with his own money, and he cannot afford for it to not successfully reflect what he already does. A family-friendly local pub that's safe and inviting for the local community. And the reason that he's chosen this pub is because of its potential to be exactly that. Things do change. He recognises the challenges. He knows all about them. Like I said, we've both spoken to the police in detail. But turning around a pub is something he's done before. He's not new to it. He will be revamping it completely and hopefully change things significantly in this area. So just to go into the changes that he will be making, there'll be a £15,000 state-of-the-art CCTV system that will cover everything, including all of the areas, the licensed areas inside, but also the police have asked for a condition that the CCTV will cover the car park. That's not a problem. There will be a £5,000 perimeter alarm. Both of those 2 pieces of equipment are monitored remotely. Now, there's Challenge 25 and all the things you would expect you'll see that have been volunteered on the application. Now, given that the revocation that you've been referred to was all about inadequate management of this pub, it's clear you're going to want to know about who will be there day to day operating this business. So in terms of staffing, I hope I'm speaking slowly enough, sorry. In terms of staffing, the vacancies are already advertised. There'll be around 15 jobs created. There'll be a manager, an experienced individual who obviously will have a personal licence. That manager will be supported by 2 assistant managers to ensure that there is supervision and management at the premises at all times. But the manager isn't going to just start and open this premises. An existing trusted manager from one of the other public houses is coming over to mentor them for at least 6 months. They're going to steady the ship, make sure that the business is established. All the supervisory staff will hold a personal licence, and then all the other staff beyond that who are responsible for selling alcohol will be internally trained on an e-learning training system. I can give you more details about that should you want it. But on top of that, Mr. Chowdhury will also personally be present for the first 3 months to make sure that everything is going to plan. So in terms of supervision, and I know that will be probably where your questions might lie because of what's gone before. He's got it completely boxed off. He'll be able to answer any questions that you've got about that. So in terms of the conditions, we volunteered conditions on the actual application itself, and then during our conversations with the police. Now, I haven't seen the police conditions within the pack, so I'm not sure if you've actually seen them at all. The police conditions are they've strengthened the CCTV condition, and then there are conditions about taking bottles outside. There's a number of conditions about risk assessing if you need SIA staff, and then a number of conditions about how the SIA staff need, what they need to wear, the register and things like that. So if you need to know specifically what they are, please let me know, but they have been agreed, no problem. So as I've said to you previously, that's the application in essence. It's fairly simple. And as I've said to you, no one is questioning Mr. Chowdhury's significant capabilities of operating licensed premises. But this is all, it's not just about his abilities, it's about his intentions for this business, particularly in light of the history and what's gone before. It's an important point that in having Mr. Chowdhury as your applicant and then hopefully your operator here, you're not dealing with a large corporate company a company who basically want to keep the door open. That is their concern. They just want to keep the door open. They want to sell their beer. And that is what happened previously that led up to the revocation. The company that was involved, and I'm telling you this from my own personal experience of being in this arena for 17 years, no personal touch. It's about churning managers in and out. And the reason that they churn managers in and out is so that when things go wrong, They put another one in to create an illusion of a clean slate. We're going to do it better this time. We've got a better man. He's better at doing this. That's what they do, and that is exactly what they did. And I'd refer you. The revocation notice, the reasons for the revocation are in the pack. They've been put in by the licensing officer, and they're very relevant here because the committee on that occasion, quite rightly by the sounds of it, revoked this license squarely on the bad management of the premises, and they said they determined that the cause of the serious crime was due to wholly inadequate management arrangements. So they're saying it is the management that has caused it, that there was no proper chain of command, there was no accountability, they hadn't recorded incidents. That's why the licence was revoked. So it's very, very relevant, the change today and who you have in front of you, because he's the opposite of that. This is his money, it's his business, and he wants it to be a success. You're dealing with a knowledgeable and reliable operator. So I want to just bring in Mr. Chowdhury now, please, if I may, let him speak to you, because you do want to hear from this individual who you're going to put your trust in. So I will just sign off at the moment, if you can just come in.
Thank you, Jill. Mr. Chowdhury.
Hi there. Hi, committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So as Jill has really, given a good background, I've been in the industry for close to 25 years. I absolutely appreciate the problems that have happened here previously. And it is absolutely down that you're dealing with a mammoth company without, Punch, Heineken, who it's a bit like steering a ship. For them to have change, it doesn't happen. With us, it's immediate. We react if there's an issue. We have audit trails in place. We have management processes in place. We've made a huge investment, not just purchasing the place, the kind of refurbishment program we've got planned here. It's huge. We have to make this work. The issue really in previous years has been the brewery, without being disrespectful, they'll put anyone in there. They just want to keep their beer flowing. And absolutely, they just need to be selling their beer. We're not in that situation. For us, the alcohol becomes an ancillary to the food. We are a food-led establishment. We become a community hub. We become a destination for where you'd want to go with your family. So it's in our interest, really, to keep everything absolutely spot on. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the resource to investment, the training programs, our infrastructure, if there's ever an incident, how it's reported, how it can be, go back, how it alerts everyone in our chain of command. And, we're not a massive organization, we employ a lot of people, but if there's an incident or we communicate, we have weekly meetings with all the managers. If there's an incident, it's emailed immediately to all the chain of command so we can react to it the following day. I've spoke to all the neighbours, and what was really alarming was that actually the problem wasn't the local area. It wasn't the local people. They're lovely people. I've knocked so many doors. I had a long conversation with Councillor Tilsley, obviously with the licensing officer as well. And actually the problem was from out of town. It was a gang-related thing. Yes, there was drugs, but that could happen anywhere. It could have happened at the Tesco down the road. And surely we wouldn't close the Tesco down. It's because it's the fact that when this problem first started, there wasn't any strong management to get in there and deal with it immediately. And it's in our interest. I appreciate the licensing activities happen inside, but we have to make sure everything's above board outside, because we can't expect to attract families, customers, and to have a problem walking through. We're going to be instating barriers. We'll have a car parking program, so to make sure there is no loitering, there's no cars parked there that there shouldn't be. We're more than happy to make sure the car park's closed off at night time within, I think the condition was asked, within half an hour of closing. It's in our benefit. And I think obviously reading the representations, the police hasn't made an objection. The licence officer met with Christina. I appreciate she's made an objection now, but initially there was an email trail to say that as long as we accept all the conditions, the licensing department won't be making any representations. I think that was sent on the 7th of June to Jill. We really are there to make it a success, you know, and at the end of the day, looking at what the history it's had, we're going to be trying even harder, because absolutely the license could be called upon at any time. You know, I want to be able to stand there and say, no, we're running a good ship. And hopefully, spoke to Councillor Tilsley in detail as well. And hopefully, you know, I've allayed his fears, his concerns. We've definitely been speaking to the locals. And what became apparent was we're there for a business to attract locals, to attract families. That's our bread and butter. Locals weren't going into that pub. So actually, there isn't a problem in the area. It wasn't that pub creating the problem. It was an outside gang, and I'm sure maybe the police could give you this information. From what I'm led to believe is that gang is now moved elsewhere. So I really would like to, you know, say that you guys to have confidence in us and that we can turn this around.
Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury. Thank you, everyone, for listening to that. I just want to go, just to clarify so that you're aware, that's the application essentially, but just so that you are aware of the chain of events with this application and certainly the licensing officer. So the licensing officer is obviously here to speak to you, but she had concerns centred around the car park and the antisocial behaviour that was on the car park. And she was willing to withdraw her representation if we accepted 2 conditions. And she actually said that subject to your confirmation in writing that you agree to accept the conditions, there will be no need for the licensing enforcement team to make a representation regarding the application submitted. Those conditions were an incident register refusals log, which obviously is accepted, no problem. The second condition was that the car park should be secured and locked 30 minutes after closing. Now, the difficulty that has seemingly been presented here by the licensing officer is I pointed out to her, well, you can't apply a condition about locking the car park because it's not relevant to the licensing activities, the licensable activities. You know, conditions, as you will know, committee, have to be relevant to the sale of alcohol and what's going on. And I pointed that out to her, but I also pointed out to her that while I believe that, we're still happy to accept that as a condition. The only proviso I put on it was, could we have that it will be locked an hour, you know, for at least an hour afterwards, because we need time for the staff to leave and tidy up and then be able to leave. But we're not going to argue whichever if you chose to take either version. But the point is, you can apply that as a condition. I might feel that it's not suitable, but you can, and we are volunteering it here today. The position stays exactly the same, that we are volunteering that condition. I'm not sure why the licensing officers chose to do a complete 360 on her position, which was documented in an email to me. Regardless of whether you choose to apply a condition about the car park being locked, can we not trust Mr. Chowdhury to do it anyway? It's in his interests to do it. It's his £1.3 million investment. He doesn't want any problems. So, you know, whether you choose to whatever your decision is on the legalities of that condition, we give you a formal undertaking here today that car park will be locked every evening. And there's no reason to doubt that will take place, given Mr. Chowdhury's character. To conclude, with the exception of a licence review, and I know you'll know this, the licensing process is forward thinking. It's about what's going to happen from today. Are the licensing objectives, the sale of alcohol and all other activities, are the licensing objectives going to be impacted? Licensing is not there to control antisocial behaviour generally. It's not there to sort out gangs and people who are causing problems on the street. As you know, the police have a toolbox, a whole toolbox to deal with those kind of problems. And the issue with the representations is that you're being asked to refuse this licence to a very high calibre applicant on that basis. You're being asked to monitor, to regulate, to try and have an impact on antisocial behaviour outside of a licensed premises. The power of review is ever present should ever any problems arise. And again, it's a significant point to note that it was the police that brought the review against this premises when it was revoked back in 2021. They've given the relevant advice. I had a very good conversation with the police and they've offered their conditions. And they say to you that with those conditions and with this applicant, this application should be granted. They are your experts in this. They are your advisors. And I would ask you to listen to what they say and have their view weigh heavily upon you. They will surely use the review process anyway. They prove that if there are any problems. As I've finished now, I just want to reiterate the point that I made about a brick wall being put up in licensing. That should never, ever happen. Quite the opposite is the case because of the review process. There should be no attempt to stop a premises from opening forever in perpetuity. That just can never be an appropriate approach. Yes, there have been problems, but Sean Chowdhury is bringing some serious credentials to the table here. He can effect some serious change at this location, but he can't do it without this licence obviously being granted today. So thank you for listening. That's the application. And if you've any questions at all, please, we're more than happy, both of us, to answer them.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Chowdhury, what experience does he have of running challenging premises?
Hi, Chair. Would you like the camera on? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Sure. So I've been in the licensed trade since I was for the last 25 years. I've taken on other pubs in challenging areas, more challenging areas, but we've turned it around. We've turned it into a community hub. You've got to understand the people who live in that area also want somewhere nice to go with their family, their children on a sunny afternoon, you know, in a beer garden. And I think I really want to highlight from what I found out and the extensive research I've done, the issue here was not the local people, was not the locals, the people who live within that perimeter of this pub. It was an outside gang coming to deal drugs. It could have happened anywhere. But the only shame thing was that they weren't strong enough. The management wasn't in place to deal with it.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Chair. If I could put this to the applicants, why this pub? Why, as I say, it has a number of challenges and has had problems in its past. Why this one?
In all honesty, firstly, because it was freehold. We don't go into what you call your typical tenanted pub. So owned by Punch, argument's sake, owned by Punch, owned by the big breweries, because their only interest is they want you to push volume. They don't care how you do it. They're charging you extortionate rents, and from day go, you just need to be selling beer. That's the wrong way. We don't operate that way. It was an ideal site. It came up for freehold, and we bought it, and we see great potential in it. You know, this for food, in terms of food, in the locality, in its catchment area, and the kind of demographics it's got. They're good demographics.
Thank you. Any more questions from members?
Myself. Chair, can I come in?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, I got 2 points for Mr. Chowdhury I'd like to ask. How familiar are you with the area? Is the area that you've known before, or what's your view on that?
Councillor, I'm based in Nuneaton, which isn't very far. I do know, I don't live in the area, going to be honest, but I'm only 15 minutes away. I am fairly familiar with the area. You know, we did a great in-depth study of the other pubs, the other food offerings in the area, which led us to believe to make this massive investment. So I'm fairly familiar. You've obviously, you know, the area is a good mix of what we would look for.
I mean, I know the pub itself. I mean, it's in a densely populated area where, you know, family houses are surrounding that. Obviously, having a pub or licensed premises there brings in a lot of issues surrounding that. I mean, from your point, you're more saying that you'll be running as more like a restaurant than like a pub. Is that correct?
So we will be selling, obviously, our main purpose of the pub restaurant will be the food, but obviously the alcohol is ancillary. As you find, the majority of our customers, not everyone, majority of the customers, when they have a nice meal, they would like to have a glass of wine. They like to have half a pint or a pint. You know, it becomes a destination, and it's hard to have a successful food operation without one, without the other.
Thank you. And thirdly, just a final, you mentioned on your speech that you have consulted with local residents.
Sure.
Can we just get a few points from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, sorry, Councillor. So basically, when we bought it, obviously we spent a good 2 or 3 weeks cleaning the place up. And obviously I took that time, I based myself there while we had contractors just doing the initial cleanup. And I knocked a lot of doors opposite, either way. I actually spoke to a lot of people passing by. There was a lot of interest. That's how I really learned some of the history. I'd already done my research, obviously, but I was amazed and shocked how many people said we would never come near the place. And I said, there was absolutely, I didn't meet one local who would use that pub. And that's what actually, it's good news in a way, because it shows you how much potential that site has got. Because we need to forget what's happened in the past. We're not going to end, we're not in that market. You know, at the end of the day, we're not there to sell cheap alcohol. We're not there to sell to appeal to the young, I'm not being ageist, but we're not there to appeal to the younger market. We're there appealing to families who want to come out in a safe, secure destination, good food, good ambience, good environment, feel safe, go home. You know what? You know that they're going to be your regulars. And I think that area is perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury. So is that all the questions from members? Yes. Okay. So we'll move on. Would those making representations like to make their presentation? Christina McCulloch, Licensing Enforcement Officer.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Christina McCulloch. I'm Licensing Enforcement Officer with Birmingham City Council. I submitted a representation on behalf of Licensing Enforcement in respect of the grant for a premises licence of George V and Common Lane, Sheldon. If I can firstly say that I appreciate that this application is submitted, the applicant in this case is completely unconnected applicant to the premises before. I have met with the applicant and I am convinced that this is a genuine application with the best interests at heart. However, the concerns that I have, as have been previously highlighted, are historical, and I believe that the problems that have been experienced there in the past were impossible for previous occupants to deal with. As been stated already, the premises was previously licensed until it was revoked in 2021. I did attach the licensing subcommittee decision because I feel that the wording contained in the document clearly painted a picture of the problems that were caused and that were suffered at the premises whilst it was licensed. Licence enforcement received complaints regarding this premises for more than 6 years. The complaints were always from local residents, and these local residents were suffering as a consequence of the activity of the premises. There was persistent breaches of crime and disorder and public nuisance. The majority of complaints did relate to the car park, which did include the dealing of drugs, congregation of people, large amounts of people, vehicles, and the way in which the vehicles were being driven on and off the premises, on the car park, and away from the premises. And there was very often loud music being played inside the vehicles, which would cause problems for the local residents. These residents would never come forward. They would never have their names put forward as part of any representations. They lived in fear. They made it quite clear that they didn't live in fear of the people that operated the premises, but it was the people that used the premises. And when I say used, I don't necessarily mean customers that were just going into the premises. It was used as a focal point. It was a congregation point. I have attached an aerial view of the premises. As you can see at Appendix 2 of my representation, as you can see, the premises has a very, very large car park. It is completely surrounded by residential homes. Over the years, as has already been said, the premises has had a lot of designated premises supervisors. The previous licence holders went from one extreme to another with the DPSs that they were putting in there. There was one DPS that was so weak, the actual users of the pub took over. They were helping themselves to alcohol. They then went to complete opposite end of the spectrum, and they used a DPS that was very strong. As soon as she came in, she barred everybody. So there was a strong management put in there. Her car was actually followed. She was stopped. She was threatened to be burned alive. She left the premises because obviously she couldn't stay there after that. But it does show that whilst I appreciate that the problems before were with the management of the premises, we did have one extreme to another. So we had a weak DPS where they ran it. When they put a strong DPS in, obviously the clientele didn't like that. So they went to the extreme and she had to leave. The emails that we received of complaints over the years have all been from local residents, the complaints that we've received, and it painted a very, very clear picture of how frustrated, anxious and indeed frightened that these people were. We weren't even allowed in the review. We couldn't even show footage because they would know where the footage had come from. Now, this is nothing to do with the license. This was nothing to do with the licence holders. This was the people that were congregating on the car park and the users of the premises that they were frightened of. They did not want to be identified. So over the years, it became clear that it didn't matter who was in control of the premises. It could never promote or even comply with the licensing objectives, particularly the promotion of public safety and the prevention of public nuisance and crime and disorder. It was totally irrelevant of who the management was. It could only be run and controlled by the users of the premises. Now, whilst I appreciate that this is a grant, I feel that a picture is painted by the fact that since 2016, the premises had 5 designated premises supervisors. Even with the change of management, it could not be controlled. The car park became a focal meeting point that people would meet there, and that would cause a lot of the problems. So the premises has been run for so many years by the patrons, the clientele, or even the people that were just coming to the area for it. I believe that it's ingrained into the business, and I fear that if the premises is reopened again, that we will have the same issues coming back again. Now, I have liaised with the agent regarding this application. As you're aware, I've also met with the licence holder. So I believe that the licence holder has the best intentions. And as has already been highlighted, I proposed a condition whereby the car park would be closed 30 minutes after licensable activity. I believe that this being put forward would aid the problem and it would give respite for local residents. However, when it was pointed out to me by the agent that this condition was actually not appropriate, I held my hands up and I have to say I agreed. In hindsight, I should not have proposed that condition because we can only cover licensable activities. I was asking for a condition to be put on the licence that did not relate to licensable activity and it did not relate it was not in licensable hours. So when the agent came back to me and said that the applicant wanted that condition, and she asked me to consider not putting it on because she did not feel it was appropriate, I agree. I don't feel it is an appropriate condition. It is a condition that would not be enforceable. I cannot make, with the licence, as far as I can see it, the licence cannot make a car park be closed after licensable hours. The car park is not a licensable area. So it could not form, in my opinion, it could not form part of the premises licence. It was with that in mind that I had to put in a representation. We have the lawyers, maybe the committee lawyer is able to come up with conditions that would be enforceable. But from an enforcement point of view, I could not put a condition on a licence that would not be enforceable. It would have been a waste of a condition and it would not help the local residents. It would not stop any future problems that may occur. So I hope that that has explained my reasoning and has explained what's happened with that condition. I have liaised with them, with the agent and the applicant. I've listened to them, and it was from listening to them and working with them that I have to agree with what Miss Sherratt said. That's my reason for putting this representation in. So, considering that the nuisance caused by the premises previously was not necessarily linked to licensable activity in licensable hours, that was my reason that I could not put that condition forward. It is not appropriate, it's not enforceable. And I would ask that if the premises licence is granted, the licence holder does have the responsibility to ensure the premises are run in accordance with the premises licence and in a lawful manner. I don't believe that this is possible at these premises, and that is no reflection at all on the applicant. As I've said, I believe he has good interests at heart and he believes he can turn it round. I'm not sure that he's fully aware of how extreme the problems were on the previous licence. And I feel that it has become the norm for this business to be operated in this way. The only thing I can say is since the licence was revoked, the residents have been able to return to a normal life, and I do feel that if it is granted again, they will suffer. I don't feel that I've put up a brick wall. Every application has to be taken on its own merit. And I appreciate that my representation is based on historical facts, but I am fearful that they are ingrained within this building, within the premises, and that they will happen again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Christina. Are there any questions from members?
I have a question, if I may, Chair. The applicant said that the problems were related to a gang who've largely moved on from the area. Do you know if that is the case or not?
I can't say whether it was a gang. From talking to the police after the premises, when the premises was closed last time, I believe they did move to another premises slightly outside of the area. Obviously, the car park is chained off at the moment, so I don't believe that there have been any instances of congregation there since. But I believe that they did move off when the premises was closed. Yes, but I can't say it was a gang.
Thank you, Christina.
I come in a second, Christina. You've mentioned that. I mean, obviously, what I would like to understand is the history of the pub. Is it a particular gang or particular group of people that has been the nuisance of this license been revoked? Was it the same people previously to the last time when the license was revoked from the licensee?
I don't
If
know.
I can,
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
I
that
don't
was
know. Sorry. Sorry
fine.
about that. Okay. I don't know who the people were that were there. The police dealt with it. I know that there had been instances in the past from the car park when the police were driving past. They got bombarded with bottles and missiles from the car park. I don't know who the people were that were causing the problem. It was a number of people. It was large amounts on the car park. The footage that residents showed, a lot of it was from their homes, so it didn't actually pick out faces. So I can't say if it was the same people or not. It was just a point. It would be nothing to have 20, 30 cars on the car park, just parked outside, revving their engines, driving around. Unfortunately, I don't know who the people were, and I can't say if it was the same people coming back all the time or if it was just different people coming on different occasions. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank
Any
you.
questions from members? No. Okay. Right, we'll move on then to have in attendance Councillor Paul Tilsley. Like to make representations.
Thank you, Chairman. As has been said, unfortunately, George V has got a an enviable reputation that has been built up over many, many years. Drug dealing, antisocial behaviour, just a general congregation point for miscreants who want to create problems in the area. Many of them actually came from the old Stirrup Cup that was closed down some years ago, which is on the corner of Horrell Road and Braes Road. And they converged upon George V. As Christina has said, particularly terrorised the local neighbours to the extent that there have been a number of properties that have been sold by local residents specifically because of the problems that have been caused, and they just felt terrorised because of the situation. And has been said again, they would not come forward and identify themselves because of the concern of repercussions. And again, quoting Christina McCulloch, Punch, who were the licence holders on behalf of Heineken. I mean, you don't get a bigger brewery than Heineken, multinational organisation, put in a variety of supervisors. The one, as Christina said, took a very, very firm line with the clientele that were visiting the pub, banned many of them. She was run out of town, virtually run out of town, threatened. She wouldn't go back. And as the coup de grace, the pub was vandalised, paint thrown over it, windows smashed. But it just shows the level of general intimidation that was taking place. Now, I have I did have a very long conversation with Mr. Chowdhury last Friday. I explained my concerns about the situation. I have to say that perhaps when the pub came up for auction, Mr. Chowdhury didn't carry out due diligence before the sale, and as a consequence, perhaps is trying to make the best of a bad job. And I say that with all due regard, because he mentioned the plough at Nuneaton. I've carried out my own investigations. I've carried out my own due diligence, and there's no complaints about the plough in Nuneaton. However, I do feel that George V is a slightly different operation. And the reason that I say that, Chair, is that Mr. Chowdhury has said that he wants it as a community pub, which is food-led. No problem with that at all. However, there are some pretty big operators in the immediate vicinity. There's Wheatsheaf, which is half a mile away. There's the Arden Oak, which is 3/4 of a mile away. There is the Crane in Cranes Park Road, which is half a mile away. And 3/4 of a mile away, you've got Wetherspoons. On top of that, you've got countless takeaways, either the Radleys or on the Coventry Road. So it's a very, very competitive market that Mr. Chowdhury is trying to get involved in. I've no doubt of his intent. I've no doubt about that. But I've always said that food-led, whether it's a restaurant or a pub, food-led, can often be loss-making, and I'll be as kind as that. I think the other point that I'd make is that Punch by Heineken had tried in the past to have a food-led operation, and it failed, and they had to revert to a drink-led operation. But in the conversations that I had with Heineken through Punch in the lead up to the special hearing, they admitted that the pub had been loss-making for many, many years, and that is why one of the reasons why they put it up for sale, because they realised that they were on a hiding to nothing. The one other issue that really does concern me, if a licence is granted, is support from the police. Now, I know through my contacts with the police, and I'm not criticising them at all, but it's all based on numbers. And the Sheldon team are based at Stetchford. Frequently, there are only one or two officers available at any one time in the Sheldon area. And if there is an incident at the pub, the police are unable to assist. And as Christina said, whenever the police drove past in marked cars, they were frequently not only abused verbally, but abused physically with stones and bottles. A very sad state of affairs, but it's all about numbers, and the police just do not have the capability of supporting the licensee, and that concerns me. Obviously, it concerns all elected members, because we rely upon the police to uphold and support our residents. The other issue that does concern me, and that is about parking. Mr. Chowdhury and his representative have bulked, I think that would be the appropriate word, about any control on the car park, and the condition that Christina tried to lay down was closing of the car park. Now, if you go around many, many pubs in the area, there is controlled parking. If you go down to the Wheatsheaf, half a mile away, there is controlled parking. You have to put your registration number on the car park when you enter the public house. There are other public houses and hotels that insist that you put your registration number into their control apparatus, and many of them do charge. So that is one way of actually controlling some of the antisocial behaviour. And it may not be a condition that is connected with licensed approval, but I think that in view of the way that the reputation of the pub has gone, that if the subcommittee is minded to grant a licence, that there should be a condition of controlled parking at this location, because that would ensure that it was not a congregation point for antisocial behaviour and drug dealing, and that there was a record of who was on the car park and their registration numbers. But it also would ensure that any miscredence could be identified, and the locality, the local residents, would be able to have a cut-off point in their lives. The other point is that the application is for the sale of alcohol on and off the premises. I would object most strongly to any application which was a license that granted off-premises drinks, because this is the short end of the wedge as far as I'm concerned. And we have to, and I have to speak on behalf of my local residents to ensure their safety and their peace of mind. And I have to tell you, colleagues, that since the licence was withdrawn late November, people in the locality have been able to lead what we all would describe as a normal life peacefully and go about their business and not worry about noise and disturbance that is coming from the pub. And don't let's forget that the public house that we're talking about is in the middle of a residential area. There are housing on all sides, so noise is an issue. Antisocial behaviour is an issue. Drug dealing is an issue. And I've no doubt that were a licence to be granted, there may be some control over the car park, but I've no doubt that the miscreants would soon park up in Common Lane and Hollywell Road to act as the focal point. And of course, with social media, it's so easy to draw a crowd and contact your friends in a way that it wasn't possible 15 years ago. So I would ask the committee not to grant the licence. If they are minded to grant the licence, to restrict the licence to on-premises drinks and to enforce a condition that there was controlled parking on the car park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tilsley. I'll now invite Councillor Green to make his representations.
Hello, everyone. This is a difficult decision for us. We've heard about many of the past problems at the George V. We've been told not to hold regard for past problems, but we can only hold regard for problems that have happened in the past. We've heard that these problems were extreme, that the local residents lived in fear, that the problems were impossible to deal with. We've heard that past management had tried to be strict and that they were followed and threatened with being burnt alive. Now, this is not a trivial or everyday matter. This is very, very serious. I don't doubt the good intentions of the licence applicant, but he's planning to do what's already been tried in the past and has failed badly. We've heard that the pub had tried in the past to be a food-led pub, and that the clientele wouldn't have that, and they reverted back to being a drink-led pub. Which is why I would object to an off-premises license. If the license is only for consumption on the premises, it can't revert back quite so easily as it was. I'll keep my comments short to hear that even the license application applicant has said that the locals don't want this. They won't go to it. We've heard from Councillor Tilsley that there are ample food-led pubs in the area, all within walking distance. This is a mistake to re-grant a license for a premises that's had such significant problems in the past. I reiterate Councillor Tilsley's plea, please don't grant a licence to this premises, and if you are minded to grant it, please grant only an on licence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Any questions from members?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to there's no questions from members. We'll move on to the closing submissions, which I'll take in reverse order. So first I'll take Christine McCulloch.
Thank you, Chair. As I previously said, complaints of an identical nature have been received by licensing enforcement for more than 6 years from local residents. The previous licence holder tried many different approaches to try and control the premises, going from a very weak DPS management style that had lost control to a very strong management process in a very strong DBS who barred customers she no longer wanted, but she was threatened. She had to leave. So it goes that it doesn't necessarily matter about strong management in these premises because the clientele have taken over in the past, and as I've said, I am fearful that they would do that again. So I appreciate that the applicant has good intentions and that he believes he can operate the premises in a lawful manner. I don't believe that this premises can be operated in a compliant manner without causing public nuisance to neighbours and without breaches of crime and disorder. As already mentioned, the premises is completely surrounded by residential homes. If the premises can't be operated in a way, if the premises can't be controlled to be lawful, it will have a massive negative impact on local residents. So considering the history of the premises, licensing enforcement does not have any confidence that the premises can be operated in a manner in which it is capable of promoting the licensing objectives, in particular the prevention of crime and disorder, and the promotion of public safety and public nuisance. Licensing enforcement would ask that the application be rejected and that the licence is not issued. However, if committee are minded to grant the licence, I would ask that they add conditions, that conditions be added to try and ensure that the past does not come back again, that the premises does need to be controlled. We need controls on the car park. It needs a lot stronger controls. Whilst I appreciate that it's been mentioned about number plate, putting in registration numbers in car parks. When I sat at the pub before at the previous licence holders, we had a conversation with them there about putting ANPR in. If you put ANPR in, if they were to put automatic number plate recognition, if there are people dealing drugs, if cars are being used for crime and disorder, cars are not necessarily registered to the people. And do we really think that if they're involved in that level of crime, if they're involved in drug dealing, they're going to be bothered about parking on a car park and having to put a registration number in? It might not work, it might work, it might not. These are just points that need raising. So I would ask that committee please reject this application. And as I say, if you are minded to grant the licence, please add conditions to ensure the recent problems don't reoccur. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I'll now ask the applicant and their representative to make their final closing submissions.
Chair, do you want to seek closing submissions from the councillors that have made representations first and then the applicant?
Certainly. Okay, so I'll ask Councillor Paul Tilsley and then Councillor Green.
Well, I hope that the comments that I made were sufficiently powerful to persuade the committee, A, not to grant a licence on these premises because of the past history, because of the fact that it's in the middle of a residential area. And I would also add about the comments that I made regarding the off-licence premise licence, and in addition, the comments that Christina has just made in support of my plea to have a controlled parking environment at the public house should the committee decide to grant a licence, because I think that it is of paramount importance that I do take the point that Christina made, and it is very relevant that if you are dealing drugs, you ain't going to come up with your correct licence on an ANPR. However, if it is a sophisticated ANPR, it could tell you whether the licence plate is compliant. But I do think that there does need to be cognizance from the subcommittee about the past history of the public house, the reputation that it has built up, the potential return of clients who have a dubious reputation, and I just feel that I have to speak on behalf of my residents who have put up with, I have to say, it was 6 years of hell from this public house. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tealsley. I'll hand over to Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. I will just end with comments. Listen to what has been said already by planning officers who believe that this is an unmanageable location. That 6 years of hell from the residents. Residents themselves say that they don't want this pub, they won't use it. Please reject this licence, or if you're minded to grant a licence, restrict it to an on licence only. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll move over to the applicant for their closing submissions. Jill?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, just bear with me because I will be responding to little bits of what has been said while I go on, so I might be a little bit disjointed. But I will start by saying that it's clearly, quite clearly, not fair or just to refuse a good operator from starting a new business because of the inadequacies and the failings of others. It doesn't matter what the problems were. It's the equivalent of saying to anyone in this group, well, you can't have a driving licence. We're not going to give you one because there are others out there who are bad drivers. I think we'd all object to that. It's clearly not the correct approach. And it's certainly not the correct approach of the licensing system. You've heard about, and while I will say to you that the conduct of the previous operators is entirely irrelevant to this application, but you've heard about the problems that have occurred and that nobody can sort this out, nobody can manage it. Well, it's been over years, yes, but you've had one operator. You've had Punch and Heineken. If these people objecting were coming to you saying, we had this operator, then a new one came in, there was this new guy, then there was another, and all of them had failed to manage the problem, then maybe there might be some cause for concern. I still think it would be irrelevant, but you might have some cause for concern. You haven't. You've had Punch. You've had Heineken Punch. They don't have a hands-on approach. They don't have a personal approach. It's quite right that what I say about Punch, they just throw managers in there. You've had a comparison given to you about a weak manager, and then we've had a really strong manager who really tried to sort this out, and look what happened to her. Well, she needed much more support than that. Anybody can see that this level of problem needed several layers of support. You don't just throw one individual manager, no matter how strong, at a problem like this. Those are Punch's failings and the previous operator's failings, and that should not be laid at the door of this new operator. It's not relevant. There's been comments about Mr. Chowdhury's good intentions, good interests at heart. Well, with the greatest of respect, he's bringing much, much more than good intentions to the table here. A £1.3 million investment with the highest level of equipment you can possibly have. There will be no access to this car park after hours. There will be no problem with the car park. Whether his business decisions result in him losing money, as Councillor Tealsley has said, it's up to him. Those are his business decisions. They're not for anyone else to comment on. The suggestion that should be controlled parking, that's nothing to do with the licensing legislation. That might be something that he looks at, but given that he's got a very, very firm lock on this car park, that means you'd essentially have to ram raid to get in. He doesn't need controlled parking. The car park already does what it needs to do in terms of providing security. The suggestion that there should be no off sales, I don't know where that's come from, because that's never been mentioned before. That seems to be completely out of the blue. And I will point out to you that practically every on licence has off sales as well. Those were gifted back from 1964. Every pub has the ability to sell off the premises, and why shouldn't they? There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that they shouldn't and that there would be any problems. I will say that it's a very, very sad state of affairs when we have to say there's no hope here. We've got to close this down. We can't let this pub ever happen again. Well, if you do what you all have always done, you're going to get what you've always got. You will never improve things for the local people, and you've got your very, very best chance to do so here. It's a very, very negative approach, a negative point of view. I mean, would you prefer that this just remains derelict and an eyesore for everyone? Or would you prefer, when you've got the calibre of this applicant who is willing to invest 1.3 million in this premises, a facility for all of those local people who've not wanted to go in this pub? It doesn't mean they won't do in the future. And they'll have a fabulous facility to use, a safe environment where they can all enjoy themselves with friends. Which one would be preferable? As part of your decision, you have to take into account the financial impact of your decision. And again, it astounds me that supportive business, which is what councils are meant to be giving, is supporting businesses, owners, jobs. We're in a terrible state of affairs in this country with everything that's going on. Mr. Chowdhury wants to open a thriving business where people will be employed, and there'll be lots of jobs for the local people. And I'd ask you to take into account, as you must, the financial impact of your decision. I want to just go back to the whether you condition it or not, but the reference to the car park being locked, which should take away Christina McCulloch's objection completely, because she said so herself in her email to me. And the final point, apart from the strength of the applicant, is the position of the police. The police are your advisors. They are your experts in all of this. They're the ones who deal with it. We've had reference from the councillor about the police and whether they have enough people to handle things. Again, not points for him to make. The police have made their feelings clear. I often go into licensing applications and hearings where I've never even spoken to the police. They've not objected, but I've never spoken to them. In this case, we've had constructive conversations. They've told us all about the problems and then said, well, okay, there are these problems. Here are the conditions we want. Go ahead and see what you can do. That is the correct approach to this application. And I would ask you to follow the police's lead, who are the experts in these things. In terms of putting on stronger controls, the police have put on extra controls, having, the police, obviously, I've said to you, they brought the review, so they know all about what went on. And in their opinion, those additional conditions are the stronger controls that you should add to this licence. So, yes, there's been problems, but this is a very simple application. To base any decision on historical facts would be a precarious position to put this application in. I feel that Mr. Chowdhury should be allowed to go and prove himself here. And if and so there's also the point that this premises has been closed for 6 months. The people who were causing the problems have moved on, so it's a clean slate and it's a new operator. And wouldn't it be wonderful if in 6 months' time, this premises is an all singing, all dancing, lovely food venue full of all the local people? So I would ask you to give him that chance and grant the licence as applied for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would Mr. Chowdhury like to say any words before we finish the meeting?
Hi, committee. No, I think Jill has summed it up pretty well. Absolutely, has said everything that I feel. And I just feel this is a local amenity for the local people, and it's wrong of us to deprive them of that. And Jill is absolutely right. We are committed. We are committed in excess of £1 million. We don't take these decisions lightly. We've done our research. We have proven business models. We have processes in place, and all I can assure you is that we will make it a success.
Thank you. I see Councillor Tilsley has his hand up, but we can no longer take questions at this point.
It's a comment, Chairman, if I may. In view of the comments that were made by Jill, I am elected to represent my constituents and speak on their behalf, and I will retain that right, as with every other elected member, to speak on behalf of the people that elect me. Thank you.
Jill, sorry, did you want to come in?
No, that's okay. Of course, that I think we're all aware of that. I just obviously the hearing has ended, hasn't it? So I just want to put my hand up. Thank you.
So with that, I'll say thank you to everybody in attendance this morning. We will now ask all parties to leave the Microsoft Teams meeting, and the members, the committee lawyer and the committee manager will go into the private session of the subcommittee and make its decision. You'll be notified of the decision of the subcommittee within 5 working days. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.